So, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Sada Innovation Lab podcast. Today, we are in Barcelona with Víctor Font. Thank you very much for being here today, Victor.
A pleasure being here. Thank you.
Well, first of all, we would like to start with a very easy question. Could you define yourself or describe a bit yourself and your career?
In my career, oof. Well, I'm a Catalan. Probably before even talking about my professional career, what's most important in my life is that I'm a father of 3 boys, and I studied at the school, at ESADE. I did the old program that doesn't exist anymore, the BA in Business Administration and MBA. It was a 5-year program. And when I finished the school, probably because I didn't know where to specialize, where to focus, I decided to do strategy consulting, and I started in a small boutique called Cluster Consulting, and I developed my career. I thought that I was going to be there for 2 years, and I ended up spending all my career until I decided to set up my own firm, which is Delta Partners. We do strategy consulting, but also investment banking, and we do that in TMT, in telecoms, media, and technology.
Great. And what led you to found Delta Partners? How was the process?
It's a very interesting story that tells you that in life, sometimes you get into crossroads that you do not know that will define your future life and your future professional career. Because I was a true corporate citizen, and I was in 2005 starting to develop client relationships in the Far East, actually in the Middle East at the beginning, but it was by coincidence. I was based here in Barcelona. I had been traveling all over the world, but a group of investors called me, and I realized that in the emerging world, in the Middle East, in Southeast Asia, in the Subindian continent, everything we had lived in the 90s in the industry, the TMT industry, here in the West, was starting to happen in the emerging world a decade later. So I found that there was a big opportunity to help clients in that part of the world, also because there was not that much competition established. So I convinced my CEO to open an office there, and basically we did extremely well. We grew the business a lot in just less than a year. So when I saw the opportunity to really become even more successful, help grow the business even more, I went back to my CEO and I asked for some support and see if we could get the backing to really scale the business. And what in theory was bad news, because the CEO told me no. He said, no, I don't want you to grow the business more because the emerging world, the perception was that there was too much risk. So that turned out to be the greatest opportunity in my life, because when the CEO said no, basically my co-founder and myself said, okay, then let's do it ourselves. And we decided to move on, and with a vision to already build a global platform, in January 2006, we decided to get started.
It's a pretty competitive sector, so why do you think your clients choose you and not another?
Yeah, and this has been probably the most, what has made us probably more proud over the years, because starting professional services, both strategy consulting and investment banking firm from scratch, and as you say, in a very competitive world, in a globalized world where in consulting you want to compete with the McKinseys, Bains and BCGs that are super powerful, well-established firms. We had the challenge of not only proving that we could be successful where we started, in the Middle East, in Southeast Asia and so on, but to be able to do the same in Europe, in the US, which is what we've done. And probably the recipe for success, what has allowed us to compete and to beat McKinsey, Bain, BCG, or JP Morgan, Morgan Stanley and others in investment banking has been, number one, industry specialization. So be focused on a couple of sectors, on telecoms, on media and tech, and probably go deeper and make sure that everyone in the team, not just the more senior people, that everyone knows what they are talking about when they do engagements and projects. And then probably the DNA of the firm, which is probably what I learned from a very entrepreneurial culture of rolling out our sleeves and making sure that everything we do for our clients goes beyond high-level recommendations, right? Be very pragmatic, be somehow hands-on, and make sure that we help clients not just to tell them what we would do, but also to help them get it done.
Makes sense. If we take maybe a jump in time to nowadays, to today, because the sector has evolved in the past 16 years that Data Partners has existed, what would you maybe say nowadays are the largest trends in the TMT sector, and how has this evolved in the past couple of years?
Well, what is pretty phenomenal is I'm not a tech guy myself, right? Not even a telco guy. Actually, I'm the kind of profile that at school, I was not the most tech-savvy geek kind of guys. No? But I was lucky enough to start my career in this industry, and I love now this industry just because it is in the center of what's disrupting the world we live in many shapes and forms. It has happened during the last decade. When I started my career, mobiles were starting to become a reality.
Yeah.
And obviously what has happened since then has been phenomenal. The kind of tools, the kind of new business models, new ways and forms of communication, of doing business, of interacting. It has transformed everything we do, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I think that we've only seen the tip of the iceberg. What the technology will do in the next decade or two will be phenomenal. And therefore being able to be there and be able to, due to the work we do, being able to be forced to learn every day, to be able to derive theses and perspectives so that most of the exam questions we are trying to solve for our clients, no one has the right answer to that, right? That's phenomenal. And what I like also a lot is that over time, the intersection between these three sectors, telecoms, media, and by media we call it, content, entertainment, even sports gets into it, and technology has been growing and growing. And therefore being able to connect these dots, and as I said, seeing how businesses are being disrupted, and how what seem to be very solid corporations suddenly have been beaten by new challengers is just phenomenal.
You just mentioned the sports industry. How do you think it will change in the following years, in the following decade?
Well, the sports, which is a sector and an industry I'm personally very passionate about, I believe there is a great opportunity in the years to come, mainly and mostly because there's a couple of trends that are affecting sports in a big way. Number one, as I was saying, technology cuts across and disrupts all industries, and sports as well, right? More and more teams, clubs, federation in any shape and form are leveraging technology to allow their athletes to compete better, to do better. Coaches also leverage technology to be able to see the game in a different way. So that's one, right? The other is that historically, traditionally, sports have not been managed as true businesses, and there's been a lack of professionalization in the sport, right? And that's why you see probably some of the largest brands in sports, and I always use the analogy of Barça, FC Barcelona, which is the top brand in football, which is the most popular sport on the earth, that from a business perspective, it's still a medium-sized company, right? I mean, we have 400 million fans all over the world or more, and we generate 600, 700 million in turnover, in revenue. There's 60, 70 companies here in Catalonia alone that generate more revenue than Barça. No? So there is an opportunity to professionalize sports, to also transform business models. Continuing on the example of Barça and the big brands, for example, in football, they have an opportunity to become B2C businesses and to sell directly to millions of fans products and services and monetize that relationship. So I think that there is plenty of opportunity, and that's why we see increasing amounts of capital and investors putting money to work in sports because they also see the opportunity.
Given your experience founding your own company, well, in Innova, we are an innovation and entrepreneurship association, so what would be your advice to someone who wants to found your own company?
Number one, that obviously there's no magic that happens, and everything costs a lot, and you always will need a combination of ingredients to succeed, right? Some depend 100% on you, and some don't. But at least the ones that depend on you, basically you should do everything you can to ensure that these requirements are fulfilled. In this list, on the things that depend on you, obviously I would put hard work for sure. Hard work, dedication and commitment is a very critical ingredient in everything you do in life, and that's why it is important to be passionate about what you are going to do, because since you are going to need to spend a lot of time, effort and dedication, you'd better do it in something that you like and that you are passionate about. The second thing, and I believe that all of you in the school are lucky because I think the school is one of the best in doing that. You need to be well equipped from a technical perspective, so you need to have the technical and functional competencies to be able to do the work, right? And the more multidisciplinary you are, in my view, the better. Understanding finance and being analytical with numbers, but at the same time being creative, also understanding what being a good leader means. So the more multidisciplinary you are, the better. And but number three, at the end, as always in life, you also need a bit of luck. And sometimes, being at the right time, in the right place, also helps a lot. And that's why when I was explaining to you how the story of Delta Partners started, it got started as a consequence of what in principle at face value was bad news, because I was being told no. If that CEO would have told me that day, yes, here you are, you have a bit of bonus and a bit of budget, and maybe the Delta Partners story would have not happened, right?
And when did you start seeing results since you founded?
Well, we were quite lucky, to be honest, because again, when I talk about, in our case, being at the right place at the right time was end of 2005 in an industry that was booming in a part of the world where there was, probably was the perfect storm. There was lack of talent, relatively speaking, quite some money ready to invest in the industry, and not a lot of advisors or people with know-how to help businesses, right? So the combination of all these factors made us succeed quite rapidly. And actually, we grew the team from 0 to 50 people in 12, 18 months. So we reached critical mass very quickly.
That's interesting. If you mind, if you take a bit more focus on this consulting sector, like you were talking about, because I know there's a lot of people inside it, and people are going to be watching this podcast that are really interested in the consulting sector, more generally working in the big companies or smaller companies like Delta Partners. And what advice could you give, like the ones you gave to entrepreneurs, but maybe to people wanting to go in this consulting sector to really have success in this?
No, first, that it is a great industry for a good number of you to start your professional careers. Although I started thinking that I was going to be in this industry for 2 years, to learn, to understand a bit better how, companies work, understand better, different functional areas, different market situations. I ended up also then liking being in this kind of flexible and changing kind of environment from a structural perspective. But even if you want to do what I thought I wanted to do, which is, after your studies, spend some time getting to understand better different company setups, different cultures, different even markets or countries or situations, that is very enriching because it prevents you from being maybe stuck, or maybe not stuck, but already be very influenced by a decision that you make if you decide to start as product manager in a consumer goods company. You are already quite influenced by that, right? Once I've already said what I said, which is that I think it's a good move to start your professional career in consulting. I think that not all consulting is the same. I think that strategy consulting is probably what, out of the different consulting activities, what gives you the more benefits linked to what I was explaining earlier in terms of flexibility, exposure to many different things, because typically you work for top management teams and therefore you have a much better perspective of wider company problems. And then, I think that the advice I would give is to get into processes with firms that do the kind of work that you believe can motivate you or that you may like, right? I mean, if you are interested in specific sectors or industries, like ourselves that work in TMT, then try to make sure that you can get into a process with companies that do interesting projects in that specific sector or activity. I think that another thing that I would say throughout the process, or even if you can do some diligence, try to speak with people that have been in the school that are working in these firms, try to understand the kind of culture. I think that the culture is a very relevant thing, because at the end, your work will be as important or more than, your couple or your family, because you'll be spending the majority of your time, right? So making sure that you work in an environment where you thrive and you enjoy being there, which is very important.
Could you explain us a bit about Kognia Sports Intelligence?
About the company itself?
Yeah.
Well, Kognia is a startup based here in Catalonia. It got started basically through an idea that the former head of methodology at FC Barcelona had, which was to see if we could develop a software that would allow users to analyze the game, a football game, and not just look at the statistics that sometimes in games we see, which is how many meters this player has played, or how many passes, or which are mere statistics that do not add any value from a football fundamentals perspective, and try to see if the software could help the users. Now I'm going to tell you who the users can be. Do an analysis, a tactical analysis of the game. So what the software does, and now this is already a reality, is it is able to analyze several hundred different football fundamentals, so game situations, and automatically try to identify how many times this happens, and whether a team or a player is applying a given fundamental in the right or in the wrong manner. This today, it's done by teams, by the analysts. Teams typically hire analysts, and that's why each top team in any top European league, for example, will have in the staff several analysts that after a game, watch the game and manually identify in each minute which kind of situations, and they take notes and so on, and then they do cuts of this, and then they show to the coach or to the decision makers specific situations. What Kognia tries to do is to do this automatically, and it leverages artificial intelligence so that the more games the software analyzes, the more it does. And this is something that, as I said, the beginning was an idea through the involvement of people like Xavi Hernandez, the current FC Barcelona coach, Iker Casillas also. We convinced him to be involved. Unai Emery, who is the coach of Villarreal, is also part of the project. So there's people that come from the football industry, and then we, for example, at Delta, some of us, some partners at Delta, also invested in the project and tried to help and complement the team with a more business kind of approach, trying to help also in identifying the right investors and basically taking the company forward.
Perfect. Super interesting. Well, if we can have a last question, maybe to wrap up, that could be a bit more precise and affect us directly. Like regarding Delta Partners, what do you think are some examples that could affect us directly in a couple of years from technology and media in general? Like a couple of maybe trends and examples that will directly affect our lives in the next couple of years.
Oof. Well, there's many things, we can think of, right? I think that obviously this whole trend on the metaverse, because of the amount of interest and the amount of stakeholders that are putting a focus on it, will become a reality, and that basically will mean that real physical and digital lives will intersect much more. Hopefully this will come with pragmatic, useful use cases as well. I still hope that watching Barca Real Madrid when I'm traveling in the other part of the world can be a much more immersed kind of experience, that I can still enjoy watching a game as if I would be on my seat in the stadium, as an example. Then there's going to be obviously significant developments on the mobility side of things. Obviously the self-driving cars, through the innovation that's happening in the space, it's going to become a reality sooner rather than later, and that will transform the way we move around, the way we organize also cities and urban developments. A third area where I expect significant innovation and changes also in health, in being able to diagnose potential diseases and problems that you may have leveraging artificial intelligence, hopefully much more in advance so that you can treat things in the right way. I think that all this will result in an improvement in quality of life, in an improvement in life expectancy as well. I think that these are just a couple of examples, but there's going to be a lot of disruption and many things that will happen in the next decade.
Next decade, what is the next decade?
The next decades as well, but in the next few years, in the short mid-term,
Exactly.
for sure.
Yeah.
Well, super interesting.
Yeah.
Well, thank you very much on behalf of all of Innova for your time giving you at the Innovation Podcast. It was a pleasure, super interesting. And good luck to you and to Delta Partners for the future.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.